listening to Into the Arena, a Hunger Games podcast sparking the fandom one episode at a time, with your hosts, Holly and Emily. Special thanks for music by Sam Cushion.
Hi all, and welcome to our 5th episode of Into the Arena. We're so happy that you guys are tuned in. I guess for any updates this week, we just wanted to mention that if you guys listening have any ideas for things we should talk about or have any questions or comments, you can email us at intothearenapodcast@gmail.com or leave us a comment on any of our social media sites. So on YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok, we are at Into the Arena Podcast.
I think that's about all for announcements, but with episode 5 today, we have a little pregame that we're going to go back from episode 1, and we're going to play a few rounds of FMK,
Yes.
or in this case, CMK. We're going to do like a little cuddle instead of F. So I guess we're just going to whip out the reaping bowl like we did the first episode and have some fun.
I just realized that, okay, well, first of all, Holly, you look awesome today because you dyed your hair purple.
I know.
Like Caesar Flickerman a little bit.
I
Catching
know.
fire.
I'm totally giving off like Caesar Flickerman vibes. So I wish this was like a capital themed episode. I didn't plan it out.
I know, and now I'm just realizing that I have the reaping ball too, like with all the character names, and I'm wearing hot pink today, so I definitely feel like I'm channeling Effie.
Yeah, so just call us Caesar and Effie this episode. Like that's
Right.
who we're referring to as. So I love it. Capital vibes.
Let's pick our 3 contestants. We've got Madge.
Oh, just talking about Madge today.
Already good.
Love Madge.
Fulvia. Why do we pick Fulvia like
All
every
the
time? She just didn't get enough in the Hunger Games books, so.
Seriously.
And Effie. Okay, interesting.
Oh,
Madge,
this is
Fulvia, and Effie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm killing off Fulvia.
Obviously, yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
We're tired of her.
Mm-hmm.
And then Effie and Madge. Oh, Madge is just so sweet. Like, I want her around for life. So I think I'm marrying Madge.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was gonna do. But I'm surprised that you would do that because
No, but Madge though, like I don't know how fun it would be to be around Effie like all the time. I just want to like dress like her. I just want to embody her.
You're just gonna like take over her life after she goes missing.
maybe if I'm just like, over at her house one night, then she'll let me borrow some of her clothes. Yeah.
There you go. See, I would have picked the exact same thing, but I'm kind of shocked about the whole Effie thing because you love her so much.
I know,
so
I betrayed her.
Yeah.
Another 3. Cinna.
I love him.
Clove.
These are some good picks. We're having some good picks today.
And Gloss.
Oh, kill Gloss, obviously. Yeah. I'm gonna marry Cinna because who doesn't want to marry Cinna?
I know.
Cinna
we're gonna do
everything.
The same thing.
Cinna is everything. So obviously I want to marry him. And then Clove, we'll just cuddle, we'll hang out, have a sweet date.
Okay, let's do one more round.
This is too easy.
I know, because we're green. That one character that's okay, Cedar.
Okay. We've picked them too.
Before. I should have picked out these people. Rue.
District 11 vibes, okay.
And Missala.
Me going through my head. Oh, Mockingjay.
So we're marrying Rue, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Rue is our friend for life.
Okay, but I thought that you said burying Rue, and I was like, oh my god, no, I wasn't gonna do that.
Not again.
No. So yeah, I wanted to marry her.
Wait, Do you think they even get buried? Like, no, right?
Well, I wonder
They get
what
sent back to
if
their district, right? Okay,
I wonder
that's
how their like funerals work though. Like, do they have like a funeral? Because like their wedding traditions are so different from what we have right now. So I'm curious if they have any sort of tradition for like funerals.
interesting. I would think that they do.
Hmm.
I'm just thinking that maybe, you know how like in over graves, like people like crumple dust and like it goes in. I'm like, what if they like crumple up their like district bread?
Oh my gosh, just crumbs. There you go. Oh my gosh. That's awful. But I want to marry Rue. We're not burying her anytime soon.
No, no, we're not burying.
I was like, oh my gosh, you're so cold-hearted. Like, whoa. Um, and then it was Masala
And Cedar.
and Cedar. Masala, I like Masala, so we're just gonna have a little fun, and then I'm just gonna kill off
We're killing
Cedar.
Cedar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I concur.
But
Okay, maybe we should do one more round.
one more. Let's see if we
Let's
don't
go for a
agree on
fourth.
this. Let's see.
Okay, Caesar Flickerman.
Me, okay.
What if we got Caesar and Effie like this round?
Oh my gosh.
Wolf. We already got him.
We're like always picking these obscure characters.
And Johanna.
Oh my gosh, my angel.
Right.
I love her.
We already know what
Okay.
we're doing, right? We're killing Wolf.
Yeah. And
And
then having
we're
a great
marrying
night with,
Johanna.
yeah, and then having a great night with Caesar,
Night
having
to
all the
remember.
capital food, Yeah, definitely a night to remember. That would be a crazy one. But oh my gosh, I guess we're
Okay,
just
well,
on the
we were
same
on the same
page.
page. Yeah.
Yeah. This episode is actually really fun, a little different from what we have been doing for our past few episodes. Today, we are going to be deep diving into the 10th anniversary interview with Suzanne Collins. And we spent the week reading through it, taking notes, and we're ready to just discuss it and talk theories, talk all things Hunger Games. I had never read it before, which I know is kind of like, oh, who is she? But I hadn't read it before because it came out when I was out of my Hunger Games phase in high school. So this was really fun for me to go back and read and really recognize how much Suzanne put into these books, like down to a T. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
I guess for some context, like David Levithan was her editor at Scholastic. He asked some
Mhm.
really good questions. So
Yeah.
I was really happy about that. 'Cause sometimes these interviews, they don't, go as deep as you want them to, but and she doesn't always answer like the most directly, but she gives pretty good answers, I
I
think.
know. She's so obscure. I'm like, girl, just tell me. I want to know.
Tell us everything. Like she doesn't give very many interviews, so this interview was just great to get from her. So maybe in
Oh
another
yeah.
10 years she'll give us even more, if
I
not
know
in
with
the books.
Ballad. I hope so. I hope so.
So just diving right into it, we decided to skip the first couple of questions because they were about Suzanne's inspiration for the Hunger Games, and one, that's kind of been talked about a lot, and two, we'll probably do a whole episode that's focused on the inception of the Hunger Games and where Suzanne got her inspiration from. So we just thought we would skip to the stuff that was a little bit more new and interesting. I'm just going to call them David and Suzanne like I know them.
We're best friends with them.
First name basis. So the first question that we have here that David asked her was about just how war stories influenced her as a child, and I thought it was fascinating. I mean, she talks a lot about this, but she makes a comment where she says that she learned a lot about the concept of war from her father, who was in the military, and he told her and her siblings stories all the time about war, and he never like talked down to them about it, and that they were never really too young to like start learning about that and knowing those stories. And I just thought it was really cool because you see that so much, like in the Hunger Games books, like Suzanne's like not afraid to go there and like go to those dark places. And I don't feel like it's ever condescending. And I'm just so happy that she had that like background and had that insight from her family life growing up so that she could bring us like the Hunger Games story in like a really like raw, real form.
Yeah. Honestly, off of what you were saying about that, it kind of reminds me of Katniss during the epilogue, talking about how her and Peter are going to go over the war and everything that they've survived with their children. And I mean, they talk about how little their
Yeah.
daughter is and how they're still already introducing her to different people who were killed and were a part of this really dark war. And so I think that's kind of interesting to hear because you're seeing a little piece of maybe Suzanne's childhood into like Katniss is a mom and her daughter too. So I think that's kind of cool.
It just makes me like the epilogue so much more because I didn't even think about it that way. Like I didn't add that extra layer to it. So that's super cool.
So emotional.
And then she continues on and starts talking about kind of her inception of the characters.
Yeah.
And she talks about Katniss and how she came up with Katniss's name, which I thought was really cool. So she's named after the arrowhead plant, but then she was looking up different alternative names that I guess probably different areas call this plant. One of them was swamp potato, another one was duck potato, and then Katniss was another one. And I just thought it was super funny that she said Katniss easily won the day out of those options.
I know, calling
Imagine
her swamp potato Everdeen.
Yeah. It's so funny.
That's like good merch idea, honestly. Swamp potato Everdeen. Just having that as a logo.
And then I loved how she was talking about, because one of the things that I love about the books is Suzanne's writing style is amazing. I love her just direct to the point. She writes a lot of these short, purposeful fragment sentences. And she was talking about how she thought it would be in third person because her Underland Chronicles books are in third person, but that Katniss, her voice just like started coming out as soon as she started writing the book, and it just came out in that first person present tense, and I love it. So I'm just super happy that like she just followed, you know, her character and what really felt right instead of maybe doing the mainstream thing, because I know some people don't really like the first person present tense, but I just feel like for Katniss it works so well.
And for me, there's something about Suzanne talking about Katniss in a way that she's real. Like it's a real
Yeah.
person saying her story because Katniss is a character that changed my life and I feel like lives inside a certain part of me mentally. And so for her to just like talk about her like that made me really excited to hear that there is a real Katniss in her mind somewhere. I don't know. It just made me, it was so cool to hear how she like communicated with that character and how she came to life. And it sounded just like instantaneous, honestly. So I just thought that was so special.
I know, she's just a genius. I'm like, how does this
I
just like
know.
flow out of you so easily?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Oh, the one quote. So this is in the interview. Um, Suzanne is answering that question about Katniss, and she goes, "Then I sat down to work, and the first page poured out in first person, like she was saying, 'Step aside. This is my story to tell.'" I'm like, "Yes, Katniss, tell your
Yeah.
story, girl."
Yeah.
I just love that line. I remember reading that and highlighting it and being like, "Oh, I love that." Katniss is real in my heart.
No, she's so amazing. She's just one of the best characters
Seriously,
ever, like of all time.
absolutely.
I thought another thing that she said was super interesting, that the District 12 dialect is
Yeah.
something that the people hold onto as sort of freedom of speech, I guess, type of, you know, it's their way of rebelling against the capital, that they don't try to take on the capital dialect or a dialect from any other region. That's something, it's part of their culture that they hold on to, and something that
Mhm.
they're able to keep.
And that's something that is really powerful too in the story And I think even we've been talking about avoxes a lot recently, thinking about how that is a huge form of taking away that sense of
Mm.
power in a person, because I mean, I never thought about the way that they spoke. I mean, besides when Gale and Katniss joke about Happy Hunger Games, saying it in Effie's voice, but just the fact that words are powerful and she addresses that in such a minor way, but it means so much, was something I hadn't even considered, honestly.
No,
So,
I love that connection with the Avoxes because it's not that they just can't speak, it's that they lose a part of themselves that was their identity.
yeah. And that ability to even have that choice in rebellion, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah. Did you imagine Katniss like with a dialect when you were reading the
No.
books? No, I didn't either. I mean, I think that's part of just reading something, especially it being first person present tense.
Hmm.
But you just imagine your own, like how you would say things.
Yeah, definitely.
I didn't really imagine a capital accent either, so I liked when the movies came out, and well, Effie's really the main one that has sort of an accent. I'm not sure that it's done super intently across the board with like capital citizens in the movies, but
Yeah.
that's the one thing that I love about um, the Katniss Chronicles, which is like an audio drama of
Hmm.
all of the books. I don't know if you had
I
mentioned it
haven't.
before, and I don't know if you started
No.
listening to it, but it's definitely like the capital accents are very much there, and the dialect of District 12 is very much there as well. So I think that helped that come alive for me in a totally
Yeah.
different way than not reading the books and not watching the movies either. So you
Yeah.
should listen to it. It's so
I
good.
I really need to, because when I think of a capital accent, I'm thinking like a British accent.
I
So
know, me
I'm
too.
really curious to hear what it actually, how other people have imagined it sounding.
There's a good take on it.
Hmm. Yeah, I would have liked to seen like Plutarch with that, or I mean Seneca, or
Yeah, they
even
don't have
Snow a little
accents at
bit.
all.
Yeah. And so I think that's why I never really envisioned it when I first read it. And even now, it's not something that I really think about when I'm reading the books. I'm reading it through what I think Katniss's voice sounds like to me. So that's what is a cool part about reading, though, that you can just have not only this image of a character, which she does talk about at some point in this interview, but also like their own voice. And maybe her voice sounds different to you and to Suzanne and to me. And that's so cool. And it means something so different to each of us. So,
Yeah. Then David and Suzanne get into a little bit about details that
mhm.
Suzanne may have come up with in the world of the Hunger Games, but that like never really made it into the books. And she says that Katniss's parents have their own histories in District 12, but I only included what's pertinent to Katniss's tale. And just makes my head spin. Like it just makes me
Yes.
start wondering about, man, Suzanne has like this whole backstory. Like there's so much that she knows about these characters and these worlds
Mhm.
that like she hasn't shared with us. And I'm like, please
I know, and
get it
for
out to us
me,
somehow.
we need like a guide. I know that there was the tribute movie guide, but we need, like Twilight has the illustrated guide. We need something like that for Hunger Games. But I don't know why there is no guide, or why she refuses to share that information,
Well,
you know?
she mentions it a little bit here. I mean, she says, I have a world of information about the characters that didn't make it into the book, with some stories revealing that could be illuminating, but in the case of the Hunger Games, I think it would only be a distraction unless it was part of a new tale within the world of Panem. So I can understand like where she's coming from. Like she doesn't think we need to know all these extra details because she wants us to focus on what's there,
Mhm.
which I get. But I'm like, I already am focused on what's there. Like, so give me the extra stuff.
Well,
Like, it's not going to take away for someone who's a huge fan who's going to go looking for that information.
yeah, I think that was the point I was trying to get across, was I'm glad she didn't put it in the books, but we need a guide so I can know more about them, because I didn't love reading about Snow, and I would love to read about other perspectives in the world, because obviously she thinks these things through very deeply. So I want to know more. I really do.
I remember when this interview first came out, I got it with the redone audiobook, which is fantastic, by the way. But this was the quote, I have a world of information about the characters that she said. I posted that on Facebook and I was like, Suzanne! But also it was making me think, like,
Please.
is she writing another book? Would she maybe write another book? Like, this was the first thing that like got my, the wheels turning a little bit, that maybe she was thinking about putting it together in a new story.
Yeah. No, I'm totally glad that she left that out from the actual series because it would have distracted us, but we need a guide. Like Twilight has a guide. I think The Hunger Games
I
needs to have
know.
a guide. So, like you said, big fans like us can get our hands on it, enjoy it, and cherish the series even more. It's not going to take anything away. It'll add
No,
it.
yeah, because the people who are just watching the movies or reading the books, like, they're gonna see that information that they need, and this extra stuff that she might reveal to us is not gonna be a distraction for them because they're like not gonna go looking for it. It's like a super
Exactly.
fan like me and you who need the guide, who like need more
Mhm.
information.
Yeah, there's this YouTuber that I love. She dives into different Hunger Games plots and different theories. I think her name on YouTube is Story Diver.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
one of her videos, she talks about like why Miss Everdeen is called Miss Everdeen and why she never gets a name. And so just like things like that, like I want to know her thought process and understand why we don't get a name for Katniss's mom. And I kind of like that she never got a name because it makes her less like it's less distracting, obviously, even though it's just one little specific piece of information. But I know that the fact that she mentions Katniss's family having this backstory, I want to know. And even now, with all the theories about Lucy Gray from Ballad and her connection to Katniss, I want to know, maybe is that a real thing? Are we losing our minds? I'm really curious. So that's the only thing that I want right now is a guide.
But then Suzanne goes and like in Songbirds and Snakes, she puts in so many details that I feel like are not
Yes.
even necessary. So I
Mhm.
don't understand. I'm
I
like,
think
do it for the
yeah.
Hunger Games too.
Well, I think that's why I had such a hard time with Ballad, and we talked about it, I think, last week,
Mhm.
was there's just so much going on, so many character names that I could care less about, to be honest with you. So it just was like reading it was going back and forth, and I'm trying to enjoy it, and it was just too much all at once.
But then, so in that case, she is right. Like,
Mhm.
it's like self-fulfilling, she talked about it being too much, and then she almost like gave us too much. And maybe it's because we just care about the original trilogy more,
Yeah.
because if we had got that level of detail, like character names and like things in the Hunger Games, we would not have been unhappy about it.
Yeah, but I think it makes me cherish those little stories. I think that's why I love Deli's character, I love Madge's character and Maisley, because they're these little pieces that help you dig deeper into the characters without distracting you from what's going on in the story. And she makes these anecdotes really, really brief. So I'm like, make a whole book about it. I will read it. I will sit down for hours. So yeah, Ballad, maybe the editors were like, "Do this to make your fans happy," and you didn't make me happy, unfortunately.
No, I love ballads, so
I
we've
know.
got to have a ballad episode soon
It's
here.
coming, it's coming.
So David asks her next if Suzanne knew from the very beginning that
Mm,
Prim was going to die at the end.
yeah,
And it's very interesting how she says, "Well, yeah, I mean I knew, but like I tried to kind of not think about it
mhm,
because you can't make it too obvious." And but she did have a pretty clear idea of where it was going to go, and like ultimately I thought it was really interesting. She says this quote, um, in Mockingjay, there's that line that's like, "Welcome to the 76th Hunger Games." And she kind of
mhm,
expands on that a little bit here, saying that Prim being safe is a complete illusion. The danger that made Prim vulnerable in the beginning, the threat of the arena, still exists. In the first book, it's the games. In the second, it becomes the platform for the revolution. And then in the third, the arena is the battleground of Panem. So no one's really safe from the arena. And I just love that. I don't love that Prim dies, but like
No.
I love that theme. And that's really where she was going at the end of this trilogy, is that, you know, it's not contained, and more the world's an arena and
Mhm.
nobody's safe.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a really it shows how great her writing is, because I mean, reading it, I never really thought about Prim dying. It was kind of obvious once you do read it that it was meant to happen, it had to happen, but she makes it seem like, because it's Katniss's main goal and it's what she's dedicated herself to for all 3 books. I don't know, it's just fascinating to me that I felt that she was safe because Katniss was in control and I trusted Katniss. And so it was a surprise, but then reflecting on it, it wasn't a surprise and it kind of had to happen. But I was just shocked by how safe she made me feel reading about Prim. Like I never felt like, oh, it's gonna happen.
It was totally a surprise to me as
Mhm.
well. But when looking back thematically, it's beautiful thematically, and it makes so
Yeah.
much sense
Mhm.
that I love
Yeah.
it, but I also hate it.
I know. And then this is, as we get into this part of the interview, I love it because the question becomes like the question that was asked to Suzanne was, if Katniss was the first character to make herself known within the story, when did Peeta and Gale come into the equation? And it was just
Mhm.
like, how did you know that this scenario was going to play out? And I just loved hearing about how they were created, because I mean, there are these fan theories that Gale was originally written in as her cousin and not her love interest. And so, me just thinking about, I don't even know how she sat down and formed all these ideas. So, reading about how Peeta and Gale appeared less quickly to her, and weren't
She
really
does
the love
say,
triangle.
like, Peeta and Gale appeared quickly, less is 2 points on a love triangle, more is two perspectives in the just war debate. So I
Yeah.
still think it's entirely possible that maybe she didn't see it as a love triangle at the beginning.
Hmm.
Like maybe Gale was a cousin or like just a family member, and then it
Yeah.
became, you know, as it developed and she was writing, became something else. But maybe she envisioned a love triangle from the very
Yeah.
beginning. I don't know. It's just funny because we were talking about the love triangle
Hmm.
last week, um, and it's just fascinating that she talks about them being two world perspectives. And
Yeah, and what they represent more so than
Mhm.
who they are, which I think is so cool. And how she
And
knew she was Team Peter from the start, so
yes, she was. She said, when I think, or David said, when I think of Katniss, I think of force over diplomacy. So I don't know. I'm still sticking with what I said last week about like it would be fine if they were cousins, because Katniss already has that
No.
within herself, and it's more about choosing the life that she wants than a lover.
Oh
So
my gosh. But it comes with the decision. It comes with who she wants to be. She wants to be more diplomatic and more caring and forgiving, which you can't pick in your cousin. So
no, but she could just be with no one.
I feel like that wouldn't get the point across though of having this choice, because she is so much like Gale that it would be an easy decision to be with Gale. But it ends up not being Gale because she learns to be who she was and where she stands in the just war theory. So I'm pro love triangle but anti Gale.
I'm still pro love. I just think it could have worked well
Hmm.
if it wasn't a love triangle. I think it's always going to be a sticking point for me that it's a love triangle, because it's one thing that makes it so similar to other stories when in a lot of other ways it's so different.
Oh, and then I loved hearing about how just the way that thing like the circle of things, and how um we see Katniss as a violent character because she's going through all these situations, but a quote she says is, Katniss isn't someone eager to engage in violence and she takes no pleasure in it. And so just seeing how it makes her character more relatable, because I know you and I and 99% of readers probably haven't been in a situation as awful as war. And so it's hard to put yourself into that perspective and understanding the actions that she follows through on, and the fact that she does kill people and kill other kids. And so for me, I thought that this was just a really interesting part to hear how much Katniss resents it, and then like all this violence, and then what she becomes out of it is really fascinating, and how that turns her more towards PETA in the end.
I liked the point that she made that in the arena, her compassionate choices are what ultimately determine her survival. I think, I don't know, that's just very interesting thinking about her and Gale and how her experiences in the arena, she didn't fight her way to the end. I mean, she's a fighter, but it was those compassionate moments, with Rue, and then Thresh being compassionate towards her and helping PETA, and Gale doesn't have those experiences to shape him in that way at all. All he knows is fighting.
Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting too, the fact that she compares Katniss and Gregor. I mean, I read the first book. That was one of the books that we read in elementary school.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, I
haven't.
remember I was in 3rd grade. I don't remember much about it. I just remember it being kind of weird with rats running around in sewers. Um, but I mean, I'd be interested to go back and read that series, just because she compares
Mhm.
Katniss and Gregor so much.
I
And
know,
I mean,
I
I
would too. My little
I haven't
brother
read it.
was like obsessed with those books, so that's the only
Really?
reason that I know anything about them.
Uh-huh. I don't know why I haven't read them, and I guess just for me, I mean, I read it, it was read to me by a teacher in 3rd grade when I was 9, and I guess obviously I wouldn't really pick up on these just war theories.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious, and they are to such a young audience, and so I guess that goes back to her wanting to teach and educate people about war even at younger ages.
Totally.
Oh, and then this was a part I liked. David asked, "Where does Haymitch fit into this examination of war, and what worldview does he bring?" And we know I love
I
Haymitch.
loved it for you. Yeah.
And like I said, I hadn't read this prior to this week, um, and in my head, I'd always been like, Haymitch is what Katniss is gonna be without PETA and without the revolution that happened, and that's what she said. And I was like, yes, Suzanne and I are on the same page. um, but I thought it was so interesting, even diving even more into that, talking about his struggles with PTSD, how badly damaged, and I like this line. She says Haymitch was badly damaged in his own war. And so that line about being in your own war, these characters are all experiencing one
Mhm.
war, but they're experiencing very different ones, because I mean, Finnick goes into his games, Annie has her games, Haymitch has his games. So they're all going through their own personal wars, but then it's one huge like populations war as well. So that was something that I hadn't really
Yeah, that's
considered.
fascinating to think about. Like, if you think about veterans, like, I'm sure there's a lot that they connect on. Like, let's say someone who was in World War II or Vietnam or the Iraq War, they probably have a lot of similarities, but they have their own, stories and totally different experiences, totally different kinds of war as well. And I'm sure it's that way with the different arenas and the different situations that they're put in as well.
Yes. And that was something I hadn't even considered. And I guess it kind of relates too to how Katniss loses touch with Gale too, because they're going through completely different wars at the same time as going through the same one. I think something that kind of surprised me from Suzanne's comment about that question David asked her on Haymitch. She says the ray of light that penetrates that very dark cloud in Haymitch's brain is the moment that Katniss volunteers for Prim. He sees as do many people in Panem, the power of her sacrifice, which I kind of debated in my head when I read that, because Haymitch doesn't see that at first, I would argue. I think,
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He's totally drunk, and
yeah.
he doesn't even want to help them at first as
Hmm.
their mentor. So
And so
that's
I don't
interesting.
know. I think it because Haymitch, I think she's giving him too much credit at that point, because I would argue he wouldn't have felt that way until the days leading up to the games, like after her training score, after the flames and the tribute parade. Like even then, I don't think that he would have thought of her sacrifice with Prim as that big of a deal, because I think he was just too far gone at that point mentally. So I don't know. I think that I kind of had to debate in my head with her about giving him too much credit.
Maybe she thinks that Haymitch is an extrovert as well.
How is that an extrovert? No.
I'm just like, if she's wrong about this, maybe there's just more to Haymitch than we really know,
He's not talking about her sacrificing himself. No.
Well, I thought it was
an introvert.
interesting that she said he manages to diffuse the escalating violence at Gale's whipping with words. And I was like, oh yeah, like it's a lot like PETA. Not that introverts can't, have good words.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. The seed of doubt is still in my mind.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I don't think so.
That's going to be my one Suzanne Collins question.
Is Haymitch an introvert or an extrovert?
To get the final decision. You had kind of an interesting comment. Next here, it looks like, after Haymitch.
Oh, yeah. So then David asks about Katniss and Gale's relationship and like the balancing act of their political views with that. So I guess she kind of discusses how that Katniss and Gale's differences of opinion are based in just war theory. And do we revolt? How do we conduct ourselves in the war? And so for me, and then another question she asks is, what do you do when someone you love, someone you know to be a good person, has a view which completely opposes your own? And that was something that I think has been raised recently in our own society, is as we become more polarized, it's relationships with friends, with family members, with loved ones, about if you have very different views, because so much is politicized. Like, do you love someone? To what extent does that change your relationship? So I found that really interesting, the fact that it's looping into our current world. So that's something that I've thought of more as I've grown up. Another thing was talking about, there's a huge question, like, did Gale kill Prim? Because we know that he did create kind of a bomb, kind of like a snare setup that killed all those Capitol children and the District 13 medic team. And so, I mean, everyone has their own opinions on it, and he was there to make it, but how much does that change Katniss and Gale's relationship? And we definitely see that in Mockingjay. So I think that's always something that I'll never know the answer to, and maybe I don't ever want to know the answer to. But I think it's fascinating to contrast their relationship and how they grow apart because of their political views.
It's fascinating and also very scary at times, how much the Hunger Games can be talked about related to current events. And I thought it was a lot when the books first came out and the movies came out, but now it's like even more. So it's almost scary. It's like the further along in time we go, like the more relatable, I guess, these books are becoming.
Which is frightening, because one of the lines in the interview is talking about how optimistic you are. Like, when does the Hunger Games series take place? And she goes, depends on how optimistic you are. Like, oh, maybe it's starting. I don't know.
Next year, here we go.
Yeah, it's too much. Stay back. I like the books. I don't like the idea of living it.
And I know there's another point that you are just like fascinated by because of, what you studied in college. Is gender studies or women's studies?
That was a big part of it. Yeah. So I majored in media studies, but what I focused on was relationships and gender and media. So I was really interested in this part about, David asked a really long question. Let's just talk about that.
Good questions.
It is a thick question.
He basically says that the roles are kind of reversed in the Hunger Games, with Gale and PETA, with Katniss being the lead, the protagonist, the one that's, at the center of things. And he says Gale in particular is kind of the girl back
Yeah.
home from kind of like from the trope of like Western and adventure
Mhm.
movies. And gosh, that was
I
just
love
something.
that. I'm reading through the notes and my comment was in all caps. I love this.
Yeah.
Because for me, this book series is so powerful because of the way that these love interests are portrayed. And one of my biggest complaints after the film came out was people complaining about Katniss taking care of Peeta and babysitting Peeta and talking about how there's these weird gender norms where it should have been switched, and if he was the guy for her, then he would have been taking care of her. First of all, no. Katniss and all women are their own human beings who can take care of themselves. And so for me, reading about how Gale was the girl back home, like, yeah, he was. He was waiting for her to come home. And Peeta, she says that he's his own strong character in his own right, and he is. You don't have to always be masculine and strong, which he is, but I mean, he's in these situations where like he's compromised, like he loses his leg and he's almost dying, and Katniss is in the 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 space to help him out. So why can't we let her help him out? And so I just loved hearing about how it is Katniss's story and how Suzanne didn't want that to be taken away by these love interests. Like, girl, she's her own woman. She can do what she wants and she can take care of both of these boys, not men. So I love that part so much.
Hmm. I love how Suzanne said it. It just was the natural way things had to be. It's not
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's fine to create a character who's strong for like the sake of being strong, and
Hmm.
but with the Hunger Games, like it doesn't ever feel forced. Like
Exactly.
uh, it's part of that. Like you're not reading it and you're like, oh, this is contrived in some way.
Hmm.
I mean, which it is because Suzanne like knew where the story was going and she planned it out so perfectly, but it never feels that way. I don't think it ever feels so like heavy-handed that it does in some other stories, um, where the intent is just to do a gender reversal, and it just doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel right. But with the Hunger Games, it always does. It kind of,
Yeah.
in a way, like I wrote Twilight as a comment here, and I'm like, what was I trying to say? Um, I don't know. It just reminds me of when Stephanie Meyer talks about gender and how everyone says like, "Oh, Bella's such a weak character," but she's not really weak. It's like
No.
in comparison to the fact that they're these two dudes who are like supernatural beings, and of course they're so much stronger. And like Bella's still a very strong character, and to me, it just feels like that's naturally the way. It would feel out of place if she was somehow so much stronger than these other characters. And I don't know,
Yeah.
I feel like in the Hunger Games it's the same way. It just feels right, and it's cool that the genders are just happen to be reversed.
And I think, and I would argue that it's not even, I guess, too reversed in a sense, because Peeta protects Katniss in a way that, I don't know, it's like he does it in a certain way. It's like a love language where he has a certain way of protecting her and she has a certain way of protecting him. And I think reading the books, you understand, like there's that line about how in Mockingjay she says, "That's what you and I do, we protect each other." He does protect her, but I mean, again, he he joins up with the careers, but then he gets his leg totally destroyed. Like, how is he supposed to be the one that's safeguarding both of them physically? But he's the one who's always mentally there for her. And I think that's where her weakest points are, is mentally, because she's dealing with so much trauma, so much PTSD. And so to have his calmness and his sincerity and support mentally, I think it's his way of taking care of her. And so that's where their strong suits kind of come into play. And so I
Yeah,
don't
as
know. I
long as
just,
they're both there for each other, and
mhm,
that's what love is, like protecting each other in the ways that they are able to do so. I mean, he's always um coming in at the clutch with his
mhm,
words.
yeah.
That's a huge thing that Katniss doesn't have.
And I think like one of the scenes from the whole series that really exemplifies that is the fog scene in Catching Fire in the Quell. where they're stumbling down the mountain and it's just a back and forth of she falls and trips and he has to come and get her, and then he trips and falls and then she has to get him.
That's a
And so
good
it's just like,
scene.
it's like,
Them just
yeah,
depending on each other.
yeah, I mean, it makes him look weak because us as a society, that's hard to
Right.
say, have made it so that the male is the one who's like gonna pick her up and drag her away and save the day. But like, no, they're in a life and death situation here. They're working together and trying to save each other. And so I really love this part of the interview because I think it highlights that relationship and that gender dynamic as well. So I loved it.
Yeah, I think the gender roles, I mean, they're reversed in the way that like typical Hollywood would show
Mhm.
them, but it's a team effort for sure.
Yeah.
Like they just love each other.
I know.
They're the
I
perfect
know.
partners.
They're perfect. Oh, I love it. And then, so this part gets really, really interesting for me because Peter's my boyfriend. So, so they talked about names and different ways or names and then different activities or interests. And so David asked for PETA, why baking? And this was something I hadn't really thought of. I don't know if it was very obvious to people, but it never
I
really
think
clicked
just
for
the way
me.
that Suzanne phrases some things, it's like things we've thought about before, but
Hmm.
maybe not this level of detail or just not in the exact perspective that she puts it into.
Yeah. So she talks about like bread crops, or she says bread crops up a lot in the Hunger Games. It's the main food source in the districts, as it was for many people historically, which we know the Hunger Games is roots a lot on history. Um, and I love this line. It seemed in keeping with his character to be a baker, a life giver, which he is.
Yeah, I love that
Oh,
a life giver
yeah.
phrase.
And it's
Mhm.
so sweet. And then, I mean, we knew about the Panem at Circensius. I don't know how to say that. Isn't it? It's something like
I have
bread and
never said that
circus.
word out loud, so
Yeah,
circuses,
I've never said
yeah.
it. So bread and circus. Um, and just reading about how even PETA's name relates to the whole trope of that, which I was just like, that's so cool. Oh my gosh.
Our little pita bread.
But yeah, and I just love it. But it also leads into a discussion on Plutarch, which for me, I never really looked at Plutarch as too big of a character. I know he's very influential, but I never considered him one of the biggest characters. And it sounds to me like Suzanne sees him that way.
I know, she had put in there's this whole paragraph she goes on about Plutarch, and it makes me, like, want a book about him or, like, his
Yeah.
backstory or something. I'm like, I would have taken that over Snow just to see how he changed and maybe, like, what things he encountered or I mean, she does say it's very self-serving of him
Hmm.
because he saw what happened to Seneca Crane and saw that, easily the same thing could happen to him. So, he might not have the most moral means for switching sides, but I just thought it was fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. This is something, it doesn't come up till later, but we're talking about Plutarch. Did you know that he was the one that fell in the punch bowl when she shot the arrow?
No, no,
I
not
didn't
until
know
I read
that.
this interview. Like, I don't think it's ever come up anywhere before,
Yeah.
and I don't think there was anything in the scene that would make you connect it back. But it does make sense that Seneca was the head game maker, and if Plutarch was the next one, that he would have been in that circle of like lower game makers already.
Hmm.
So it makes sense that he was there, but that's hilarious.
I also wanted to say that like game makers, I feel like that's a pyramid scheme because they're just like slowly working their way up. You know what I mean? They
And then
have people
they
below
bring
them.
people under them. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a pyramid scheme. That's what I've decided after reading this interview. But I was like, did I miss something? Because the way that she defines or describes the way that, oh yeah, he was the one who she shot at and fell into the punch bowl. I'm like,
Like she
girl, how
knows.
did I know? Like, how did I know this?
It makes me want to go back and read all the books and look for any obscure reference to some character and be like, okay, who is that?
Well, yeah, because I mean, later in the interview, when she's talking about all these links between the books, she talks about, oh, yeah, she mentions the District 7 victor, Johanna Mason,
Yeah,
which I'm
by
like,
name.
okay,
So that's
exactly. so it's obvious, but this one falling into a punch bowl, like there was no physical description of the guy, how was I supposed to know? So I just thought that was really fun. And
The fact
that's
that
why I
she
want a
just
guide.
drops that in.
I
Like, see,
know. I
that's
was
why
like,
we need a guide. Like,
yes,
tell us all the
please.
things.
Because there's probably some more secrets spread out in here that I need to know.
I also thought it was interesting when she's talking about him that she says he's one of the few characters who has a sense of the arc of history, which
Hmm.
makes me wonder. He has, that quote at the end that we're fickle, stupid human beings. He knows some, at least, of the history of humanity. And I'm wondering how he knows that.
Hmm.
Is he just so high up that he's able to see like older books or like documents? Or because I'm sure in school they don't teach the history of the world, at least even from a perspective that would be not sanitized by the capital.
Hmm.
So it makes me wonder, like, how is Plutarch the way that he is? And that's
Maybe
why it
there's
makes
like
me
a,
want
I feel like there's a dark web that he's probably a part of.
to quit.
The dark Hunger Games web where it has like the Wikipedia of the United States and he knows everything.
I like how you said, Suzanne says that the 13 districts are a nod to the 13 colonies of
I
America.
didn't know
You're like,
that.
duh.
I said duh, but I said that because in my head I didn't recognize that. And I'm not stupid. I like to think that I'm not a stupid person, but a lot of these little details I did not pick up on.
I'm not
I don't
sure that I
know.
would connect those dots, and I'm not sure that there's. Well, I guess there's a reason. I mean, I think it further ties into like District 11 and like,
Hmm.
them being black for the
Hmm.
most part, I think, in that district, and tying that into like the 13 colonies. I don't think there's a lot there that
But I
it's the
just
13.
like
It's just the number 13.
I know. I always just like 13 and for most of the books or most of the time you're thinking 12, so it was never something I'd put together.
Yeah,
And
that's true too.
she always emphasizes the fact that it's not just the United States, that it's North America as a whole region.
Yeah,
So
she's
it was
talking
never
about
something I
the map later. That's one of those things that she feels like we don't need to know.
Yes, we do. We need to know everything.
It's always so confusing. There's multiple maps that have come out. Like, we, as fans, before there were any maps, like, thought District 4 was in a totally different place than District 4
Yeah.
really is. Now we know that it's more like the Pacific Northwest, but
Hmm.
we
It's
just
just
need a
so
guide.
strange. Yeah. So it's just again, we're like you just said, the guide. We need the guide because I think it's hidden in plain sight. All of these things are right in front of us. And she's just kind of like laughing at us at this point in seclusion because she just lives off in the middle of nowhere. So,
Maybe that's why she doesn't tell us this stuff, though, because she says the 13 colonies, and we're like, okay, like what do we do with that information?
but I love that information. Like, I think it's
I
so
know,
cool.
but there's also like no reason for it.
Well, what am I gonna do? I don't know. I just want to know. Oh, oh, I really like this part. David asked, "How do you think being from District 12 defines Katniss, Peeta, and Gale? Could they have been from any other district?" And I never really thought about that, I guess. And so she goes into how it's pretty much the most pathetic district to the capital. And so it's just kind of everything is a lot looser there in terms of rules. And like they have the Hob, the peacekeepers are very cordial, like Darius and everything. She says this makes the capital more approachable on a level, more possible to befriend, and more possible to defeat, more human. So I love that she personified the capital, and in doing so, creates this weird connection between District 12 and the capital in terms of power structures that I thought was
Mm.
really fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, and then I just kind of made a comment that it further complicates things because it goes into that just war debate. It makes it even harder. If they're more humanized, then, is it right to kill, to, participate in more? Like, what are the reasons that makes it okay if they're seen more as humans and not just this evil entity?
Yeah, and so yeah, going into war, I love thinking as the I love thinking of the districts as their own characters too. That's kind of fun.
You highlighted this comment that Suzanne said that Snow thinks that he's always holding Panem together, and you're like, narcissist? Yes.
I think he is a narcissist. I think
Oh,
after
definitely.
reading
After
Ballad,
reading Ballad,
he
mhm.
thinks he's
so
the
like being so possessive of Lucy, and
yes,
gosh, he just thinks he's like
the
best
next god
sliced bread, you know?
since Peta sliced bread. But
She hasn't tried pita sliced bread. Like,
oh, he wishes. But yeah, I thought that was really funny. I don't know. He's definitely a narcissist because
for
I think
sure.
I think that's how he holds his power. I think that's how he comes to power, is just thinking. I mean, we hear his perspective in Ballad, and he's so full of himself. Like, get off your high horse.
Especially at the end of Ballad as well, which we
Yeah.
won't talk about, but
We'll come back and talk about his
down.
narcissism. And then I love, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. This is what makes me think, like, was she must have been writing Ballad when she did this interview.
Yes.
Right? I mean, she had to have, if it took her like, I don't know, like 2 years to write. She would have been in the middle of Ballad.
And so I thought, like, how her just talking about Snow, I don't know, it makes me excited, but it also makes me hate Snow even more because I didn't like Ballad too much. So I don't know, but the one part that I did like was David asking about the bond between Katniss and Snow, and Suzanne in her answer goes back to the line from the end of Mockingjay where Katniss goes to visit Snow in the Rose Garden. And he says, "I was watching you, Mockingjay, and you are watching me. I'm afraid we both have been played for fools."
Gosh,
And
that's a good line.
it's just it's so badass. I love it. Oh my god, I get chills. Yes.
Like all of Suzanne's writing.
Pop off, queen. But I don't know. I thought it was so interesting to even think about the fact that it is an alliance, because this whole thing is a war overall. The arena is still existing. And it's interesting how Snow is definitely the bad guy here, but they do get played for fools, and all of a sudden they have to work together to get rid of Coin. I think that's her putting in that
Right.
into
The whole
words.
thing is an arena. The war is an arena, and Katniss and Snow are so focused on each other. It reminds me of when Haymitch says to Katniss, when you're in the arena, remember who the real enemy is.
Girl! Oh!
That's Coin.
That's so badass. Oh, I love that.
I love it.
That's so cool. Oh, it just all connects. That's why she's such a good writer, because everything is like weaved together. So perfect. And then, wait, I said something about Lucy. Where did I say this about Lucy? Oh, okay.
Well, she also says, so her quote, she says, without saying too much, he's been waiting for Katniss for a long time. And
I
I'm
hate
like,
that.
Without saying too much, like, you mean without saying that I'm writing an entire book about Snow? He's been waiting for Katniss for a long time.
So you read this interview years ago, like when it came out. Emily, it was right there.
I did.
It was right there.
On this, I did not pick up on the without saying too much. Like, why didn't I mean, she could just be saying without going into a long tangent, but I think she's given us a clue there. Why didn't we see it?
I'm saying everything she wants us to know is in front of us right now. So like let's read
Suzanne
into
Collins
everything.
Says something, pay attention.
Yes. Because okay, so she says
no words are wasted.
He's been waiting for Katniss for a long time, and I go, Lucy, ? Because Ballad, the connections between Lucy and Snow and potentially Katniss, I mean, I don't know, maybe she's hinting at it. Maybe the rumors are true, guys. I don't know. That's just I'm like really observant about every little thing she says. So maybe the rumors are true. For those who haven't read it, just ignore what I just said. Just keep it obscure in your mind, but maybe the rumors are true, guys. I don't know.
we have got to debrief on Ballad.
Yeah, just a fan theory idea. That's what we need to do. And then one thing that I liked is the comparison between Cinna and Caesar, which was something I had never thought of, you know, which is a question that David asked. And I mean, like, David, okay, he knows a lot. He must know some more things, but I don't know. I thought it was fascinating how Suzanne talks about Cinna using his artistic gifts, and the idea of spectacle and beauty versus, I mean, Caesar does the exact same thing with Peta when he's held as a prisoner of war. And the line she says is, they are both helping to keep up appearances.
Yeah.
So
Caesar
crazy.
is trying to like placate, like, yeah. Trying to keep things kind of subdued, whereas Sin is trying to incite.
Yeah, which is so cool. I never thought of them as opposing characters. I love this comment that you said. They're talking about like the connections to the geography of Panem, and Suzanne says it makes little difference to Katniss what we called Panem in the past, and you said I love and hate this about Suzanne's storytelling.
I know.
Same.
Like, I love that she doesn't like waste anything. I mean, we've been talking about this. She doesn't waste words, but at the same time, like, we want to know. Like, I want to know what district I'm in.
Yeah, seriously. We can only do so much speculating, Suzanne, please.
Well, one quote that I said, that I highlighted, because she was talking about how the Underland Chronicles was fantasy and the Hunger Games was dystopia. And she says, the thing is, whether you came for the war, dystopia, action adventure, propaganda, coming of age, or romance, gosh, it's so many things. I'm just happy you're reading it. And I don't know, that just like touched my heart. Sometimes the Hunger Games fandom can be, or at least it was, kind of like a place a little bit elitist, I don't know, in a way. Like,
yes,
you know, you have to pay attention to the really the war story parts, and like, it's, you know, like if you were here for the romance, like it wasn't as much of a fan, or, you know, that kind of thing. But like Suzanne is against that. Like,
no, definitely.
she is happy, you know, no matter who is reading the story, because everybody has different perspectives and everybody takes something different from the story. And I feel like it's all good, and Suzanne thinks so too. So I just love that quote from her.
And I think I definitely have to agree that when the fandom first was like at its peak 10 years ago, I think that it was really elitist and it was a really toxic fandom. And so I'm kind of personally, like, this is a tangent, but personally I'm kind of glad the fandoms died down, and I hope with the release of Ballad and the fact that the fans who have stuck with the fandom have aged a little bit, I hope that everyone can be a little bit less toxic and more accepting to new fans, because that was one thing that was difficult about being in this fandom again, was just how strong people felt about it, in a sense that they would leave other people out. So everyone, let's just make that our goal for Ballad. Let's all be friendly and welcoming to new fans, because again, whatever you enjoy in the series, enjoy it. Suzanne says so we listen to the queen. Like,
even if you love Gail, it's fine.
Exactly. You can love, girl, we can coexist, we can be friends. I just won't agree with you. But exactly, like, everyone should be welcome in a fandom, and I really like that she said that too. It just goes to show that she cares about her little fans. Don't be mean to each other. You can be mean to Gail, but don't be mean to each other. So
yeah, she's like, I wrote this as a war story. This is what I was trying to communicate. This is what came from like my heart and my experiences. But, you know, it's out of my hands. It's what you get out of it. And I'm happy you're reading it either way. So then she does talk about her writing style and her structure and how she put the books together, which, I mean, it just more fascinating, juicy stuff that we get to learn. It's not surprising that she says structure is her favorite part about writing, because it's so structured. And I never realized, obviously each of the there's 3 books, and then each of the books have 3 parts, but I never realized that they were all 9 chapters long, like each of the parts. Like, it's so detailed in her like first act, second act, third act, and just how much her script writing and theater background has really played into being able to like craft the perfect story.
Wait a minute. Because of that, we need a Hunger Games musical. We need it. Let's make it happen.
like a Shakespearean style.
Yes.
Like, I mean,
yes. Because I mean, she even talks in this interview about getting, I think it was like either Plutarch's or Coriolanus's name from a Shakespearean play. So
Yeah, she's big into Shakespeare.
she set it up for us. Let's just that's what we need is a live action. Or
Oh
like,
my gosh. It'd be kind of
yeah,
like, I feel like spoken word almost a little bit, maybe.
yes. So not like singing because it's too dark to be singing about, but I like the spoken word idea
That sounds
and
so cool.
it would
Let's
be
start
so
this.
awesome. Guys, I can't sing, but if
You heard
anyone
it
can
here
sing,
first.
we're going into production. Somebody call Suzanne, get her on the phone. Oh, that's so cool to me. I mean, it's set up there ready to go, so
No, yeah, I agree. How amazing is it that I'm just so happy that she had that experience in screenwriting and working for television, and that she was
Mhm.
able to write like the first draft of the Hunger Games script, because I don't think a lot of authors have done that or would have the skills to be able to do that.
Yeah, but I was a little mad at her for that because she was
Yeah,
the one who cut out Madge. She was the one.
that part I don't understand. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I
don't
feel
either.
like the books are to movie adaptation is really great. I mean, it's so much
Mhm.
better than a lot of other series that we get, but I yeah, I did read something with, was it in this interview or something else, that Suzanne was totally fine with cutting stuff out.
I don't
Like
like that girl. Keep it in, queen,
like
you didn't
you
give us
wrote
enough.
it, you are so detailed, you had the structure, like the things that you didn't waste any words. So like
Mhm.
most of those things like need to make it into the film.
I know, and
It's not
I
like the books are
understand, but
long either.
yeah, and we talked about it last week, like, you could easily slip Madge in, you could easily slip Maisley
So
in.
easy.
So, I just came up with a theory in my head that she hates Madge. I mean, she killed her off in the books, and she didn't want her in the movies, so Suzanne Collins hates Madge.
Have you read the original first draft script?
No, I haven't.
The one that's like Suzanne Collins and then treatments like with Billy Ray.
No, I haven't.
We should do an episode where we go through the original script and
Oh,
talk about
yeah,
the
I would
things that
love
are
that.
different. Okay, I won't. Do you know some of the things that were in the original script?
No.
Okay, then I won't spoil it for you.
Oh my gosh, wait, so
There's some
Madge
things I
wasn't in
want
the
to.
original?
She wasn't in it, but
Okay,
there's some
well, come on,
things.
Suzanne.
No, yeah, but there are some crazy things that happened
I've
that I
like
want to talk about.
I've never sat down and read a script for anything, like
Well,
any
this will
movie
be
I'm
your
interested
first
in.
time.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. That sounds cool, but now I'm interested. Okay. Um, but then I liked the part about her talking about her books and how she got to the drafting and writing process, but
Mhm.
I really like talking about the original titles of the books. So
I know.
the original Hunger Games was called The Tribute of District 12, and then Catching Fire was originally called The Ripple Effect, and
Which,
then what was it? Mockingjay was like something she wanted it with ashes, something about that.
yeah, it makes me think about, what is the popular thing for books now, calling it like, I just think about like the ACOTAR books, like a court of whatever and whatever, like
Mhm.
maybe it was something like that, like something ashes and fire, or like I don't know.
Yeah, and then
I
Sarah
wonder what it
released those
was.
books, and Suzanne's like, "See, I told you we should have done that.
And it
It's
became a
working out now."
thing.
But, yeah, I mean, thank God for David because I the tribute of District 12, like, imagine going to a library and, like, what does that even mean, you
But it's
know?
funny because it reminds me of the books in German are, the first one is die Die Tribute von Panem. So it's almost the
Really?
same. It's the tribute from Panem.
And it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
the
it
Hunger
doesn't.
Games, you're like, "What is the
Sounds
Hunger
cool
Games?"
though. Die Tribute
Yeah.
von Panem. I
But
totally butchered that. I'm sorry if anybody's from Germany.
they're like, "No, stop." But I don't know, I'm just really glad, and the fact that she reflects on calling the ripple or catching fire the ripple effect was too watery. I'm like, true. I
Yeah,
think
no
it sounds
place for
like
a girl on fire.
I think it sounded like a self-help book, like the ripple
Yeah,
effect, you know?
I read that and I was like, this sounds like an economic principle or something.
Yeah.
But then I actually looked up the definition of ripple effect, and it's an initial disturbance to a system that propagates outward to disturb an increasingly larger portion of the system. And I'm like, okay, well, I can see where she was coming with ripple effect, because
Katniss.
that's what happens in Catching Fire. But Catching Fire is so much cooler.
It's just way better. I'm so glad for
The fact
David.
that, yeah, fire is just like the theme throughout. The spark is really in the Hunger Games. Catching Fire is it catching fire.
Yeah.
And Mockingjay, it's just an inferno.
Yeah. I love that.
It sounds so normal now, the Hunger Games, but like it's a weird name.
Yeah. I think
Hunger Games.
it makes you ask a lot, but then she does talk about the reason why it is hunger
Because
and
food is
how
so important.
food can be used as a weapon. And she even states like in the future I'm thinking that food is going to be used as a weapon more, which is really
I
fascinating.
read that, and that's such a scary thought, because it sounds so possible, so feasible, especially the fact that, you know, we get our food. You know, we don't create our own food for the most part. You know, we go to a store, I mean, look at what happened when we were going into lockdown for the first time for coronavirus. I mean, like getting the toilet paper and getting all the pasta and, you know, and that wasn't even really that serious ultimately. So it's a scary thought. Food is really something that controls people, and
it's frightening. But that was really interesting to me. And then it kind of reminded me that line about food being a weapon of I'm trying to think of what they were called in the 74th games at, I'm like totally blanking. The feast. The bags that each of the tributes needed, and how Katniss and Peeta needed the medicine. And I mean, like, I've read a lot about fan theories and what could have been in the other bags, and how Cato and Clove depended so much on the food that was given to them.
that it
So
was
they,
just food or
yeah.
supplies.
Well, I think it ends up being like the armor, the full body armor or whatever, for the arrows. But people have like talked about like maybe in the bag it could have been food, or how, I guess even then, like Katniss talking about the pile that she blew up, talking about how the food there was really, really important to them because they didn't even know how to hunt and gather. And so again, like the Hunger Games is really symbolic towards even Katniss's abilities of getting food and feeding her family herself.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's on the same playing field in that regard. If you don't have food, I mean, in the arena, you're not going to make it very far.
Yeah, but it makes Katniss more powerful too, the fact that she can get her own food, which I guess was something that I hadn't really considered when you're talking about going into this awful arena and there's weapons and you're killing other kids. Like, you're not thinking about food, you know? So I think that's really fascinating that she focused a lot of her writing on the arenas about collecting food.
I like that they said, David said that we easily had over 100 different covers created before they landed on the iconic Hunger Games cover. And I'm just like, I want to see those covers, because he says some of them pictured Katniss, and there was others that tried to like picture scenes from the book. I just want to see them.
Like, what scenes are we talking about here? I'm really
like
curious.
The reaping, maybe, like the volunteering moment, like maybe just in the arena.
And I want to know like how the illustrations of Katniss looked, you know?
Have you seen the Japanese cover? The original
No.
Japanese cover? You should Google it right now, because that's one of the few that has it's very like anime kind of style. But I love that cover. There's are a few things on my list of like merch or like collectible items I would like, and if I could have the original Hunger Games Japanese book, that is like on my short list for sure.
Okay, but her boobs in this.
I know. But
Okay,
it's so
Katniss.
cool.
It's really cool, and the font is really
I like
cool.
PETA on the cover.
Oh, and I like the bow because it seems pretty simple. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I would want that too. Where would you even
I want
find
it
that?
so bad. I don't know, because I'm pretty sure once it was established that they were popular,
Mhm.
then the next printing in Japan was the standard cover.
Yeah.
Most foreign
Katniss's
publishers,
boobs.
yeah,
I can't get
most
over that.
most of the publishers went with the same basically cover as in the States. So
Mhm. That's so cool.
I love have you seen the German covers? We could just
I
talk about
haven't seen these
different
covers. Like,
covers.
I love that you know all of these covers. No.
It's
German.
just like her face, and then there's like leaves in the front, but I think that one, like, it just looks so badass.
Oh, I have seen that. I have seen that.
And
I
it
don't
says
like it.
the
I don't
tribute
know.
von Panem. Like, I don't know. That's such a cool sounding title, not in English.
I don't know. I've seen it before. I thought it was a fan cover, to
I
be
mean,
honest with you.
it's not as good as the Mockingjay pen, for
Mhm.
sure, but I think it is cool to see other interpretations and
Oh,
other.
yeah.
It's much more standard YA.
There's a bunch of different ones. Yeah. I see what you mean by they pretty much followed the same layout. But yeah, the Japanese one is very different.
Mhm.
That's cool.
I want it.
I really want the European ones, like I think the British ones or whatever.
Oh,
Those I don't
I
have
have
those.
one of those. They're like blue, orange, and black.
Yeah.
I have the Mockingjay one that's orange, because when
Oh,
I was
sweet.
at the premiere in London, I didn't have my Hunger Games books with me from home, so I had to go to Waterstones
Ah, so
and
cool.
buy the book, and then that's what I had all the cast sign. So I do
Oh
have
my
that one.
gosh. That's cool. Hold on to that forever. Um, I'm just gonna skip down to talking about the actors
Yeah.
and their appearances. Did you picture, like, when you were thinking of Katniss, does she look like Jennifer Lawrence to you, or describe your Katniss to me? I'm really curious.
Oh, definitely more person of color. I mean,
Mhm.
when I was reading, well, olive skin, just, darker, more like black
Mhm.
hair. Definitely not like Jen. I mean,
Yeah.
Jen is great, but also just, I hate to say thinner, because it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with, like, Jennifer is beautiful. Um,
Mhm.
but she didn't have like the most food and everything, so I just picture her a bit
She's
smaller.
starving.
And
Yeah.
yeah, she hasn't had the best like health.
Mhm.
So, but I Jen's fine.
Yeah. I love Jen in the movies, and I love that Suzanne was as obsessed with her as the fans are.
Oh yeah, for the
But
movie, she's fantastic.
she's perfect. But yeah, I think it's interesting because when I have characters in my head, I see like their whole body. I just don't really have a face to them. I don't know. Like, I can think of their like most of
Yeah,
their physical
that's
self.
me as well. Like,
Yeah.
definitely the general like outline, like the shape,
Hmm.
and like usually the hair, I pretty well too, but not like, and maybe like the general like shape of their face, but not
Yeah.
the lips and the nose and the eyes. Like, I mean, I don't picture a full person.
And I love how she says like my Katniss, there's no actress that exists that looks like her.
Mhm.
Like, so cool.
Yeah, I do feel like she was too lenient a little bit in regards to the movies. And
Hmm.
like you were saying, like cutting out Madge, and I feel like there are some things. Well, I wonder if she was determined that the tributes from District 11 had to be black.
Hmm.
I hope that they were. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what ended up happening, but I like that she can separate the books and the movies. Like, as long as the heart is there, like the emotions, it follows the same arc, and we get to the same end result.
Yeah.
As long as it's a good movie and like does those basic things. then it's a good adaptation. Yeah.
Definitely.
I like hearing her say that it's a faithful adaptation in her eyes.
Mm-hmm. Because I mean, there's no way that you can perfectly translate what someone's mind is onto a screen, you know?
No.
Because
And
there's,
everyone's different too. You know, it's not
yeah.
just Suzanne's mind, it's all her readers.
Hmm. I would just love if there was some sort of technology where I could like a Renesmee, like I touch her face and I could just see like what Katniss looks like in her head. Because
Right?
I'm really curious. And then I guess it's getting towards the end of the interview, just talking about the impact across the world, a lot of human rights abuses, propaganda, um, the human experience, how that all ties into them. And I think it's really fascinating. I mean, the Hunger Games is taught in a lot of schools, which I think is really awesome. I never got to read it in school, but I know that a lot of people did figure out or find out about the Hunger Games because it was used as learning material. Because I mean, in high school, you read like Lord of the Flies, Fahrenheit 451. Now they're introducing the Hunger Games. So I'm really
Yeah.
curious to see if like years down the line, that is something that's looked at as an important piece of work, just like the first book on its own.
Yeah, it makes me think of how Jacqueline Emerson, who played Foxface, said that she was a super fan of the books because they read it at her school. It was like their all school read. A
Mhm.
lot of schools have done that, which is awesome. It's like
Mhm.
totally English classroom worthy.
Yeah. I mean, if I was an English teacher, I'd make my students read about it, but I am a little biased. So but I mean, I don't know if you have any more comments, but I just loved how Suzanne ended the interview and said, "Thank you for joining Katniss on her journey." Again, I just love the thought of thinking of Katniss as some real embodiment of
Mhm.
something, an idea, a character. And so for me, I was just like crying. I love that.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.
I
Which
know.
it's a phrase that she herself uses, which
Hmm.
I love.
Which the fans go crazy for. But I just love that. And so it was a really enriching interview. I learned so much, and
I thought
even
so.
down to little details about Plutarch falling in the punch bowl. So, I mean, if you
Was
guys
that the biggest reveal of
I think it was. I think
the
it
interview?
was.
He was
I
there
know
the
for
whole
me,
time.
the fact that he was there and there was no hinting towards that. I mean, she just kind of like mic drops it in there. So, shout out to Suzanne for doing that,
I
but
always love
thanks for
hearing
blowing
about
my mind.
the process of like the books,
Mhm.
the publishing side. So like the covers, um, the different titles, like the editing
Mhm.
process, probably because like I don't know, it's like my secret dream to be an editor, or like was back in the day. So
Yeah.
hearing parts of that behind the scenes is always fun for me.
Yeah. It was just a really cool interview, and I can't wait for a 10-year Ballad one.
Right?
I can't wait.
Yes.
I'll be
Explain.
too old. I'll be way too old.
We'll still be doing this, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. But it was super fun, and if you guys haven't read it, you can find this interview, I'm sure, online. I'm not promoting that, but you can find it online. And the audiobook that was released on the 10-year anniversary, and then and the 10-year, like, where is it? These books, um, the 10th anniversary special edition ones, you can find them in the first book. So get your hands on it, read it, and let us know what your thoughts are on the interview. I'd love to hear what you guys were interested in reading about it.
Yeah, it's definitely worth sitting down and reading the full 10 pages.
Hmm.
There's also a second interview in there as well that we didn't talk about, but it was kind of an older
Is
interview
there?
from
Wait,
like
where?
2013. I don't know, it was in my PDF. I think it's in your book too. It's in
No,
the
it's
book
not.
and in the audiobook.
Is it? I mean, like, I've looked through this. I'm so interested. Oh yeah, in 2013. Girl, I gotta get on this. Yeah, I never like read any interviews. I don't know. For me, it was more like I loved the books because it was like me experiencing them, and so I never took the time to read the interviews. So I'm gonna get on that. That's my homework for the week.
She does so few interviews that like
Yeah.
I just like eat them up.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that was really fun. I love that. Next week's episode, Emily and I are so pumped for. We are
Yes.
going to be discussing the first Hunger Games soundtrack. And yeah, that's all we're going to say. It's going to be kind of a surprise, but honestly, the best soundtrack, in my opinion. And we can't wait to finally do a music episode. So can't wait to talk to you guys about it. But yes. And if you guys are enjoying, please, 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 one thing that we'll ask is please leave us a review. Like, we want to get the fandom back together. We're getting the family back together, guys. So please leave us a review if you are enjoying the podcast. And we just want to reach out to more fans and get everyone engaged. So please, if you have time, do that. And then again, follow our social media accounts at Into the Arena Podcast on Instagram and TikTok and get to know Emily and I a little bit more. So we're so excited. And until next week, take care. May the odds be ever in your favor. And we'll see you next time talking about music.
Bye.
Bye.